Have you ever been listening to music, maybe a rock beat or a really hard-driving hip-hop track, and it just hits you with this incredible energy?
Yeah, not just speed, but like a real gut feeling power.
Exactly. And that exact need for music to be louder and deeper and way more soulful is what drove this amazing style of jazz we're talking about today.
We are diving into hard bop. It's a sound that really changed the entire direction of American music right in the mid 1950s.
Hard bop is just huge. It's like the sound of jazz deciding it was time to move out of the university lecture hall and get back onto the street corner,
Right. It took these incredibly demanding technical rules from earlier jazz,
which were awesome, but sometimes a little hard to follow.
and it infused them with just genuine emotion, made it powerful, immediate, and honestly, totally addictive.
So for this deep dive, we're tackling the whole story, where this sound was born, what musical tricks made it so aggressive, the powerhouse musicians behind it all, and why it's still like the ultimate starting point for understanding jazz today.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. If the music suddenly got harder, that must mean it was reacting to something that came before it. Where did this all take root?
It popped up squarely in the middle of the 1950s,
Yeah.
and it was really driven by musicians in big northern cities, especially New York City and Detroit.
Okay.
Musically, it was a direct extension of bebop, the style right before it, but it wasn't just satisfied repeating the past.
It was a reaction then. What were they reacting against?
Well, they were kind of looking sideways at what was sometimes called cool jazz or West Coast jazz.
Oh, right.
And that style was often quieter, more relaxed, and sometimes it could feel a little detached, a little intellectual.
And hard bop musicians basically said, no, we need to bring the fire back.
Precisely. So if cool jazz felt like something you'd analyze, hard bop was something you absolutely had to feel.
Yeah.
Their goal, their core mission, was to revitalize the music by really bringing the African-American cultural roots of jazz. We're talking blues and gospel right back to the forefront.
So they were looking for a more aggressive, more rhythmic, and just a way more emotionally direct sound.
And that focus on power and feeling, it worked. It made hard bop one of the most popular and even commercially successful forms of jazz in the U.S. during that whole era.
It was music that grabbed you. It demanded you pay attention.
And this is where we get to the core of it all. Hard bop was a deliberate move towards being more accessible, more popular. Bebop had become so technically difficult that it was almost turning into like academic music.
Right.
Hard bop wanted to make jazz profitable and even danceable again for the average person, but without sacrificing that incredible musicianship.
That urgency, you can hear it. When you put on a hard bop track, the very first thing that hits you is that driving energy. It
Yeah.
still uses complex harmonies and fast tempos, but the focus shifts.
And that intense energy makes you feel connected instantly. The musical lines just feel less angular than earlier jazz, so it has this forward momentum that just pulls you along.
And here's an aha fact. Even though the chords underneath are super complex and brilliant, the melodies themselves are often much simpler. They're more memorable.
Easier to walk away humming.
Totally. It's high-level skill, but it's packaged in a way that's completely approachable.
But the real game changer, rhythmically, happened in the back with the drums.
Okay, so tell me about that. What was it about the drummer's role that just fundamentally shifted the whole sound?
Well, before hard bop, a drummer's main job was often just to keep a steady, kind of subtle beat, mostly on the ride cymbal.
Okay.
In hard bop, the drummer's role just exploded. They got louder, much more aggressive, and they started having a direct conversation with the soloists.
So they weren't just the foundation anymore.
No.
They were a voice in the conversation.
That's it, exactly. They started using the bass drum and the snare drum to make these sudden, loud hits, these accents that talked back to the saxophone or the trumpet player.
Oh.
They'd punctuate phrases, almost finishing the soloist's musical sentences for them.
And that technique has such an awesome name. Everyone needs to remember this one.
It does. It was called dropping bombs.
Dropping bombs. Love it.
I mean, think about it. A sudden, explosive accent that just shakes the whole arrangement. If you've ever heard a drummer do a sudden, syncopated hit that drives the band forward in modern music, that aggressive tradition started right here.
And that energy wasn't just the drums, right? The whole rhythm section was heavier.
Oh, yeah. The bass lines are heavy, providing this really powerful foundation, and the rhythms are deeply syncopated, meaning the strong accents fall on the weaker offbeats. That borrowed heavily from traditional African musical ideas.
So the whole vibe is, it's sophisticated because these players are geniuses, but it's also really earthy and gritty.
It sounds like a big city at midnight. High energy, bustling, complex, but also beautiful.
Okay, so that intense rhythmic dialogue, the dropping bombs, where did that deep driving energy really come from culturally?
This is where we connect it all back to the cultural history of Black America. Hard bop is just absolutely saturated with traditional blues.
So how did they weave that blues structure into such complex jazz?
Well, composers loved using the classic 12-bar blues structure. It's instantly recognizable and deeply soulful.
Right.
So they'd use that as the foundation for brand new jazz songs. And that immediately gave the music this familiar, heartfelt quality that listeners could latch onto, even if the solos were totally wild.
And the soloists didn't just play the notes, right? They made the instrument sing the blues.
Absolutely. When a soloist improvised, they'd use techniques like bending notes and using blue notes.
But our blue notes, exactly.
They're specific notes that are slightly lowered in pitch, and they create this feeling of tension or sorrow. It mimics the expressive, sometimes straining sound of a blues singer's voice.
That makes so much sense. You're giving the instrument a human voice full of all that emotion.
And that's exactly why those complex harmonies suddenly felt so accessible. You felt the story the musician was telling, even if you couldn't name the chord they were playing.
The blues connection is massive. But you also mentioned the church. The gospel influence must have been huge for this sound.
It was fundamental. So many hard bop musicians grew up playing in churches, and they carried those spiritual sounds right into the jazz clubs.
You can hear it, right? Those church-like chord progressions.
Oh, frequently. It gives the music this rich, uplifting quality.
And this blend of the secular blues and the spiritual gospel. That's where the term soul jazz comes from, right?
Exactly. It added this sense of joy, of community, this kind of call and response feeling.
Yeah.
Soul jazz tracks often had these repetitive grooves, a heavy emphasis on thick piano chords, and sometimes you'd even hear hand-clapping rhythms. It felt like a whole community was involved in the music. It was jazz with a shout.
That spiritual quality really defined the sound for the late 1950s. Okay, so if we wanted to go see a hard bop band live back then, what kind of group would we be looking for? What's the ideal lineup?
The standard setup is a quintetto, 5 specific instruments. This was kind of the perfect size to get those powerful, complex arrangements, but still sound unified and driving.
And the sound starts up front with the front line.
Yep, the front line is usually a trumpet and a tenor saxophone, and they often play the melody together in unison, which creates this incredibly thick, powerful, almost shouting lead sound.
And then you've got the engine room, the rhythm section, which has to be super heavy to support that front line.
That's your piano, upright bass, and the drum kit. Every single one of them is essential for creating that strong rhythmic foundation, which lets the soloists just cut loose.
Now, if you had to pick one instrument that became the ultimate symbol, the iconic voice of the hard bop era, what would it be?
Oh, it absolutely has to be the tenor saxophone.
And why the tenor over the alto sax? The alto was so popular in the years before.
Well, the tenor just has a larger, much deeper register than the alto. It allowed players to develop this really rugged and muscular tone.
A sound that perfectly matched the aggressive music.
Exactly. I mean, think of players like John Coltrane, who basically defined the sound of the instrument for that era.
That rugged quality is key. You mentioned its expressive range lets players sound like they're shouting or crying.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful image.
It is. The tenor sax was the instrument that could most effectively use those blues techniques, bending notes using blue notes, to make the complex jazz feel deeply personal and vocal. Its sound just symbolized the emotional honesty the whole genre was aiming for.
This music didn't just appear out of nowhere, though. It was driven by some incredible personalities who weren't just great players, but brilliant strategists. Let's talk about the innovators.
Okay, we have to start with the man often credited with bringing the funky element into jazz, the pianist and composer Horace Silver.
What made Silver's style so funky?
Silver was just a master of melody and groove. He made a conscious choice to move away from the hyperspeed and jagged lines of bebop. His compositions emphasized memorable, simple melodies and crucially repetitive bass lines.
And those repetitive bass lines create the groove.
They do. They make the music feel locked in and easy to tap your foot to.
His songs were catchy.
Super catchy. They had strong rhythmic pulses, and they were instantly popular because people could feel the rhythms so deeply. He proved that jazz didn't have to be confusingly fast. It could be intellectually fascinating and physically fun. A total genius of accessibility.
So if Silver defined the groove, we have to talk about the man who defined the fire and the leadership.
Okay.
The legendary drummer, Art Blakey.
Blakey embodied the power and energy of hard bop. just a powerhouse drummer known for his explosive accents, those fantastic loud press rolls across the snare, and his relentless drive.
And his band, the Jazz Messengers, it wasn't just a band, was it? It was practically a university for new talent. It lasted for decades.
It was a launching pad. Blakey believed young players had to, quote, learn how to fight musically and play with fire and great physical energy. He pushed them to be aggressive and spontaneous. He ran this hard-driving, aggressive school of sound that just kept the style evolving.
Now, behind all this, there was one company that helped package and sell this entire movement, turning it from a local thing into a national sound.
That would be Blue Note Records. They are arguably the single most important record label for hard bop, and their brand is legendary.
They were famous for two things, right? The sound
Right.
quality and the album covers.
Incredible sound quality and absolutely iconic, stylish album covers. But what's fascinating is how they supported the musicians. They didn't just record them, they invested in the music itself.
What do you mean?
Well, they encouraged musicians to write original material, not just play old standards. And, get this, they did something highly unusual for the time. They paid the musicians for dedicated rehearsal time before the recording session.
Wait, they paid them to rehearse. Why was that so important?
Think about it. When musicians are actually paid to practice together, they show up to the studio with these incredibly tight, polished arrangements.
Ah, I see.
And that resulted in the high-quality, organized, yet fiery sound that defines Blue Note's hard bop records. They turned passion into a highly professional art form.
So we've covered the sound, the stars. We know hard bop came from bebop, but the differences are what really define the new era. Let's nail down that comparison. It feels like a key distinction.
It is. If we look at the core difference, bebop was often played at such extreme speeds, with such complex melodic lines, that it could feel emotionally distant.
Right, music for the musicians sometimes.
Exactly, sometimes leaving the average listener behind. Hard bop made an adjustment. It slowed things down just enough.
I mean, we're still talking fast.
Oh, for sure. But it did so to emphasize the soul, the expression, the rhythmic feel. The melodies became more singable, less jagged.
And this brings up a key point about the purpose. Bebop was so focused on the technical skill, the virtuosity of the individual soloist, kind of showing off how fast and smart they were.
Whereas hard bop, while still requiring genius-level skill, shifted the focus. It put more emphasis on the overall arrangement and the cohesive, tight sound of the group as a whole.
It's a group statement, rooted in community, not just a solo showcase.
And that embrace of outside influences, the gospel, the R&B, the clear blues structure, it made hard bop so much more connected to popular culture of the day than bebop ever really intended to be. It required genius, but it was also designed to connect.
So what does this all mean for us listening to music today? I mean, hard bop isn't just history on a dusty record shelf.
No way. Its legacy is enormous. If you or someone you know is studying jazz in school right now, the hard bop model, that quintet format, the emphasis on rhythm, the balance of skill and soul, is almost certainly the main curriculum.
It set the standard for modern small group jazz.
It really did. And you hear its direct influence everywhere. That aggressive, syncopated drumming is still the core of modern rhythm sections. Elements of that heavy groove and emotional honesty have found their way into hip-hop and neo-soul.
In fact, if you listen to a hip-hop producer looking for a sophisticated beat, they're constantly sampling those old, high-quality, Blue Note hard bop records to create new tracks.
It shows that the fire and energy of the 1950s is still alive and kicking.
Hard bop fundamentally proved that music doesn't have to choose. You can be a total technical genius, operating at the highest level, but still make music that connects directly to people's hearts.
And that synthesis, high skill, deep feeling, and an undeniable groove is why hard bop remains one of the most studied and loved forms of music ever created. It showed the world that smart music could still feel great.
Keep exploring that fusion of fire and soul.
Good luck with your studies.